There is absolutely no denying the cultural significance of Metal Gear Solid 1. This game came out when I was about 6 months old, so obviously I didn't play it back then. However, I do have some memories of watching my neighbour, watching my brother, watching my dad play it. But it was a game that I dabbled in as like a PS1 classic on PS3, but I never really went very far with it. But I have zero nostalgia for this game, so this is a non-nostalgic review of Metal Gear Solid 1 in a modern lens. How does the game hold up? Is it still fun to play? Specifically, I played the Master Collection on PS5, so let's talk about it. So of course, we're going to have to start with the story, because that's what Metal Gear is known for, and I'm a gameplay first sort of player. Yes, story is important to me, but gameplay is always king. And I won't beat around the bush here, I honestly adored this story. The fact that this was released in 1998 and still has a story that is so compelling, with characters that are so interesting, voice acting that is just of a quality that realistically some games don't even match today. And then on top of that, behind this is a big conspiracy with different world leaders bidding on Metal Gear and all this. And every single time that codec came up and someone was telling me about some crap that was going on in the story, or there was a cutscene with two villains speaking to each other, I was just engrossed in it. And if you want one takeaway from this review, is that the story of this game still holds up today. Yes, it's very campy and cheesy. The writing is kind of slaps you in the face with certain things. One character would mention something like some event that happened, and then the other character will respond like, oh, that was this, wasn't it? And when that happened, the writing was jarring. But in general, just there's loads of cheese going on all over the place. And one thing that I have to commend the story on is how rich everything is. It's you get that Snake has had past relationships with these characters. You get that this world is lived in, and it does a really good job at sort of giving you small nuggets of information in the codec calls and in different interactions with NPCs and characters, explaining that, oh yeah, well, Snake knows this character, or Snake doesn't know this character, or maybe they're related somehow, or they fought in some war together. And I'm just really engrossed in this world and the characters, and I'd like to think that later on all of these sort of threads are pulled upon and they're sort of fleshed out further, because I know the games bounce around in times, like some are set in the 70s, some are set in the 80s, 90s, and the 2000s. So I'm kind of hoping that going forward I will now experience all of these sorts of things that I have going on behind my head, like who are all the members of Foxhound, and who exactly is Big Boss. It tells me enough that I know what's going on, but also not enough that I still have loads of questions going into the next games. Now, it obviously helped that Metal Gear Solid 1 was a smash hit, which launched this franchise, because if this was a failure, we probably would have never figured that out. But obviously I have the luxury now of knowing that there are loads of Metal Gear games that will tell me all about this story. Now, I was playing this game in bed, I was streaming it to my Steam Deck from the PlayStation, and I was looking at a cutscene, and I just turned to my girlfriend and was like, this used to be the pinnacle of video game cutscenes, and it's just so funny. Like, the voice acting is fantastic, the story I think is just really interesting, but it's the fact that it's like Snake and some character both have smudge faces and they're talking to each other, delivering this story about how the world is, oh, these people, they're trying to get nuclear warheads so we can blow up this, and then they can bid this and they can get all this money and scam the government out of stuff. And I'm just like, just two smudge faces just talking to each other, like shaking their head like this, and that's the only emotion. And it's funny how far things have come. There's still loads to love about this story, but it's nice to reflect on how far everything has come. Now, the codec itself is quite interesting, because I'd imagine back in the day, getting these calls from these characters and they're fleshing out the world and giving you tips and tricks and story tidbits and all that was quite cool. One of my biggest issues with the story is that you get a codec call, and then you walk 10 steps and you get another codec call, and then you listen to that codec call for like 30-40 seconds, and then you have to like walk another 30 seconds, and then you get another codec call. It doesn't happen all too often, but there were times when I was like, wait, why didn't they just give me this call all in one instead of having me walk 10 steps? But it's a minor gripe. Now onto the gameplay, and I think you can guess where I'm going with this. I did get used to the controls, but generally the gameplay isn't amazing. So I want to get the good things out of the way first, because this game does a lot of cool things that I really enjoy. So obviously it's a stealth game. I love stealth games, and this actually feels like a stealth game because enemies see you almost instantly. If you walk into the line of sight of a camera, you're caught, and if you get caught, in most instances you're pretty much dead. I mean, you can shoot them, but you're better off just reloading the room and then going back out and restart, which I really liked. I really enjoyed the stealth mechanics of this game. And then there was a couple of things, and there's little tidbits that I probably still don't know myself of the gameplay, that are just revolutionary. Like the fact that the first room teaches you that if you walk into a puddle, the enemies will hear that. Or if you have footprints in the snow, the enemies will follow the footprints. There are just loads of different things like that that I experience in this game, and it's something that nowadays we take for granted because, oh, of course an enemy will be able to look at your footprints in the snow because that's just how AI works. But back then, AI didn't work like that. AI didn't react to different footsteps on puddles. And that sort of stuff is really, really mind-blowing. And I think that's part of the reason why this game is so significant. Because, yeah, the story is fantastic. This sort of showed what a game cinematics can be. But also, it showed the attention to detail that certain games can have. I mean, later on down the line, we have these absolutely fantastic studios like Rockstar, Naughty Dog, and what Nintendo did with Breath of the Wild and stuff, that you can see that this was the blueprint. This was the blueprint of, if you think this should happen, it probably will. And I think with the issues that I have with this game, there's just something so special about that. And that's the reason why I understand. I love this game, I really do. But when it comes to the rest of the gameplay is where it kind of gets a bit frustrating. So firstly, you cannot remap the controls in the Master Collection, so Circle is confirmed. Now I did have a PS1, so I do remember the days when sometimes Circle was to confirm, sometimes X was to confirm. That's just how it was. But obviously, through a modern lens, that just get really confusing, and the amount of times I clicked into things or exited out of things when I wanted to do something else. And that's just like a minor frustration. But then you get into stuff, and I know that this does get fixed in Metal Gear Solid 2 because, spoiler alert, I've already started it and that game feels so much better to play. But in Metal Gear Solid 1, like, you can't aim down sights. You can't see where your gun is because you can only look in first person and you can't shoot at the same time. So then there's parts where this game gets really frustrating with that, like specifically the part where you're running up the stairs. I'm sure a lot of people have had issues with this. Eventually I just figured out, throw a load of stun grenades as you keep running up and you'll be fine. But there's loads of points when being able to look down first person would have been amazing, because there's enemies off in the distance that I can't see because of how the camera is laid out, but they can shoot me, and that's just like one of the frustrations of playing this game nowadays. But eventually you get used to the game's quirks. Like, this is something that when you go back and you play these games that don't have standardized controls, that yeah, it takes some time and there will be frustration in sort of, oh crap, I meant to press this button, or oh no, I meant to crouch instead of crawl. And there's a bit of frustration there. Once you get over it, it's fine. But it's just like one of the things that sort of, you know, they just scratch away at your armor as you're going through the game and kind of make it a lesser experience than probably what it would have been back in the day. There's just certain design choices that just make no sense. So at one point, just after the Sniper Wolf fight, there's a part where you have to do this QTE and you have to smack down on the circle button because one of the characters is electrocuting you. The only thing is, and this is the only time this happens in the game, if you die there, the game ends and you get sent back to the main menu. And I hadn't saved. And that Sniper Wolf fight is, eventually I got good with the sniper, but took me quite some time to beat that boss, and then I do that thing and I fail that QTE. And then I go all the way back, and I hadn't saved for like an hour, so then I had to go back and do everything. But luckily, the way this game is set up, once you kind of know what you're doing, you can get through the bits, you know, in 15-20 minutes for what took me an hour. And that just made absolutely no sense. I think the pacing of this game in the first half is absolutely phenomenal. Like, it's amazing. You're getting story, you're getting cool stealth sections, and then you get bosses and bosses and bosses and bosses, and I'll later go into the boss because the bosses are fantastic. But the pacing in the first half is brilliant. And then the second half, you could see they were like, oh shit, this game's kind of short. Let's pad it out a bit. So then there's times where you have to do all this backtracking. And in the grand scheme of things, this game is like maybe 10, like I think I put like 10 hours into it, but that was me figuring out stuff. I'm sure you could probably beat this game in 5 or 6. So it wasn't actually, in the grand scheme of things, actually that much time, like maybe like an hour of backtracking. But the fact that there are 2 specific sections where you have to backtrack through areas that you'd already been to, it's like, oh. I think that's my main issue with the game, where them moments that just kind of felt a bit almost out of the blue with, say, where you died and got sent back, or where they just kind of ground the pacing down to a halt. Because otherwise, I can get around clunky controls, because this is an old game, I can get around that. But, you know, bad pacing is bad pacing, and it's still annoying. But of course, I saved the best for last, and that is the bosses of Metal Gear Solid 1, because every single one of these boss fights is unique, and I will remember them for till the day I die, I guess, because Not only are their designs cool, not only is the voice acting and their stories super campy and cheesy and just so engrossing, but they all use a different mechanic. Revolver Ocelot is mostly a shooting gallery boss, and he's definitely the easiest of the lot. And then Cyborg Ninja has a cool stealth mechanic where he goes invisible, and then that's a hand-to-hand combat boss fight. And then you have the tank, which is just absolutely insane. You're fighting a tank. And every single time I got to fight a boss, I was excited because of just simply how memorable they are. Now, no Metal Gear Solid 1 video would be complete without talking about Psycho Man. Widely considered to be one of, if not the best boss fight ever created. And there's a lot of things you learn about certain games through osmosis. Just, I have been engrossed in gaming since I was about 10, watching YouTube videos, retrospectives, podcasts, just anything I can get, just give me games, just inject them straight into my veins. And you learn a lot about Metal Gear Solid through that. Obviously, I knew about Psycho Mantis. And through a modern lens, I can still appreciate how cool it was back in the day. But since I knew what was going on and I knew how to fight him, I was like, yes, I can appreciate how good this was back in the day. But nowadays, it hardly even hits. Because the second I got to Psycho Mantis, I knew that in the menu I could change the player 2 controller and I could deal damage to him. I think the real question is how the feck could anybody figure this out back in the day? Apparently, if you ring the colonel on the codec like 7 times, he'll eventually tell you, which is just bizarre. And also you could shoot the 2 busts in the room and that removes the psycho powers, which I guess is probably the more sort of realistic way of figuring out how to fight him. Regardless, I can only imagine how cool that was, how he fecked with your TV kind of with the changing the output, and how he tells you to put your controller down and rumbles it. Like it's just so cool, and it just shows just how sort of futuristic and ahead of the time this game was, because that's, even to this day, while it doesn't hit, I can still appreciate just how interesting and how unique that was. And then before I wrap this up, there's also one more thing that I want to talk about, and that is the Merrill codec number. How the feck are you supposed to figure this out? Because it says it's on the back of the CD case. Now, I don't know what it was like back in 1998, but I never, ever called a game case a CD case. Now, I grew up with a PS1. I had a PS1. I had an N64. I never, ever called it a CD case. They were specifically asking you to check on the back of the CD case. And Snake has a CD case in his inventory. So I was sitting around for like 5 or 10 minutes. I was mashing it. I was in a room with computers and I was like, oh, maybe I have to put it into one of the computers. But then it turns out that you have to look at the back of the manual, because there's a picture of the codec call and then you can ring her. And yeah, I don't know where they came up with that. But this game, to this day, still fantastic. I love the story. The gameplay hasn't aged the best, but it's definitely playable once you get over the clunky controls. I think the pacing obviously isn't amazing, but what you get here is just a brilliant story that just had me from minute one. And as I said in my other Metal Gear Solid video, I think there are just certain games that, for me as a reviewer, I need to just play them. I've played a lot of games, played a lot of series. Metal Gear was one of them that was a blind spot for me. And I'm glad that I played this game. I am currently playing Metal Gear Solid 2, and so far I'm absolutely loving that game because it just controls better. And the crazy sort of weird story is still there, which I really like. So yes, I really appreciate you watching. Let me know what you think of Metal Gear Solid 1, especially the Master Collection, because it certainly isn't the best port, but it's a way for me to play the games on a modern platform. So I'm not too disappointed in it, but it certainly could have been better. But thank you for watching. Don't forget to subscribe. See you all next video.